The alarms screamed, tearing us from our sleep, a symphony of metal twisting against rock. We weren't just lost. We were about to become dust on a moon no map had ever dared to name, and somewhere something was watching. The impact shook the very core of the Odyssey asterisk, a vessel built for exploration, not for becoming a meteorite. My body slammed against the safety restraints, my teeth rattling together with a sickening crunch. The lights flickered, a desperate strobe illuminating panic-stricken faces. A dull thud echoed through the command deck, followed by an unnerving silence. Then, the hiss of rapidly depressurizing compartments. Commander Eva Rostova, my rank echoing the chaos, fought against the rising nausea. My hands, still tingling from the impact, fumbled for the emergency comms. Nothing but static. A red light blinked furiously on the main console, indicating structural integrity at less than 15%. Below us, outside the ship, an ancient alien vessel, cloaked and silent, drifted like a dark shard of glass against the blackness. Inside its observation deck, Scholar Kael, a being of thin, iridescent limbs and multifaceted eyes, watched the human ship's descent with a calculated disinterest. His primary directive: observe, record, do not interfere. The Xylos were ancient, their civilization spanning star clusters, their knowledge of the universe vast. They had cataloged countless species, witnessed the birth and death of stars, but the humans, they were a new, curious entry. The asterisk Odyssey had veered far off its charted course, a glitch in the cosmic tapestry that had brought them to this void moon, a desolate rock the Xylos called Xylos-Seven-Alpha, a graveyard for nascent suns and forgotten matter. Kael noted the energy signatures fading, the life signs flickering like dying embers. "Another one bites the dust," murmured Observer Jax, a younger, more impulsive Xylos, his vocalizer emitting a series of rapid clicks. Kael merely extended one of his slender digits, touching a holographic projection of the moon's surface. "Its atmosphere is corrosive, its core unstable. No complex organic life can sustain itself here for more than a few standard cycles," Kael responded, his voice a series of low hums. "They are already gone." On Xylos-Seven-Alpha, within the crippled remains of the Odyssey asterisk, a faint light returned. It was the emergency power, a stubborn spark in the encroaching darkness. My head throbbed, a drumbeat against my skull. "Status report," I yelled, my voice hoarse, cutting through the stunned silence. Jax, our chief engineer, a man whose hands always smelled of lubricant and burnt circuitry, was already on his feet, limping towards the auxiliary panels. His usually neat dark hair was a mess, streaks of grime smudging his cheek. "Hull integrity critical, Commander. Main reactor offline. Emergency life support holding, but for how long I don't know." His voice was tight, strained. Dr. Lena Petrova, our chief medical officer and xenobotanist, a woman with soft eyes and an iron will, was already tending to the few injured crew members. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, burnt plastic, and a faint, acrid metallic tang from the moon's surface seeping in. The ship lay tilted at a precarious angle, its nose buried deep in the alien soil. Through a shattered viewport, the moonscape was a desolate tapestry of jagged, charcoal-gray peaks and endless, dust-swept plains under a sky that was a perpetual, starless twilight. The low gravity made every movement floaty, unreal. "Casualties?" I asked, forcing my gaze away from the moon's bleak beauty. Lena shook her head, her movements slow and deliberate. "4 serious, Commander, broken bones, internal bleeding, others concussed, bruised. No fatalities yet, thankfully." Her voice was a balm, calm amidst the rising fear. "But our medical supplies are limited, and the air, it's thin, recycled. We need external air, fresh water, and heat quickly." Kael's holographic display showed the human ship, a bruised and broken thing, but the life signs were indeed stabilizing. "An unexpected resilience," Kael observed, projecting the images for Jax. "Their internal systems are surprisingly robust." Jax flicked a clawed digit. "For now, they will suffocate or dehydrate. This moon has no visible water ice, no liquid water, and its atmospheric composition is lethal to carbon-based life forms without advanced filtration." Kael merely hummed, his multifaceted eyes focusing on a small group of human figures emerging from a damaged section of the ship. They moved with a peculiar grace in the low gravity, burdened by what appeared to be scavenged tools. On the surface, the air was a sharp, biting cold, dry as ancient dust. The wind, a constant low moan, carried fine, abrasive particles that stung exposed skin. Jax, Lena, and I led the first scouting party, our breath plumed in the frigid air, quickly dissipating. The ground beneath our boots crunched, a mix of pulverized rock and something crystalline that glittered faintly in the perpetual twilight. It felt like walking on broken glass. We wore hastily patched environmental suits, but the pressure seals were imperfect, a constant reminder of our fragile existence. "We need to find a stable area for a temporary shelter," I announced, scanning the desolate horizon. "And power, we need to divert what little remains from the Odyssey to critical life support, but we can't drain it dry." Jax pointed to a cluster of strange, spire-like rock formations in the distance. They rose like skeletal fingers from the moon's surface, black and twisted, unlike anything he had seen in geological surveys. "Those might offer some natural protection from the wind, Commander, or perhaps something we can anchor to." Lena, meanwhile, knelt, pulling a small analysis kit from her pack. She ran a scanner over the ground, her brow furrowed. "The soil here, it's rich in heavy metals but devoid of organic compounds. And the atmosphere is primarily nitrogen and argon, with traces of methane. Oxygen levels are practically zero. Not even extremophiles could survive here naturally." Her voice held a note of grim determination. "Back on the Xylos Observer 1 *, Jax chuckled, a series of rapid clicks. "Their organic sensors must be screaming. They are truly in a dead place." Kael remained silent, his gaze fixed on the human figures. He observed their synchronized movements, the way they communicated without spoken words, anticipating each other's needs. He saw the smallest one, the female with the soft eyes, collect samples with meticulous care, despite the moon's hostile nature. "They seek life where there is none," Jax continued, shaking his head. "A futile endeavor." "Perhaps," Kael finally responded, his voice low. "But they are persistent. Note their energy expenditure. It is remarkably efficient for a species so recently emerged from their crash state." Days blurred into a monotonous cycle of scavenging and struggle. The core crew of 37 survivors worked tirelessly. Our water recyclers from the ship, designed for short-term missions, struggled with the moon's unique mineral composition. The water tasted metallic, slightly bitter, but it kept us alive. Food was dwindling, prepackaged nutrient paste that offered little comfort. Jax, ever the pragmatist, salvaged what he could from the wreckage: conduits, panels, even bits of the ship's outer plating. He directed teams to cut away the least damaged sections, forming a rudimentary, airtight shelter around a small, functional air scrubber. The air inside the makeshift dome, crudely sealed with melted plastic and reinforced with salvaged metal beams, was stale, recycled, but it was breathable. The structure was cramped, barely tall enough to stand upright, but it offered shelter from the biting winds and the constant threat of micrometeorites. The temperature inside hovered just above freezing, a stark contrast to the -100 °C outside. "We need a stable power source," Jax stated one evening, his face smudged with grease, illuminated by the single flickering emergency light inside the dome. "The ship's power cells are almost drained. We've got maybe another 2 weeks, tops, before everything goes dark." Lena, who had spent her days meticulously cataloging every rock sample, every dust particle, suddenly pointed to one of the strange, black spires we had scouted days ago. "Commander Jax, look at this scan." She projected a thermal image onto a small, salvaged screen. The spire pulsed with an internal heat, faint but unmistakable. "These formations, they're not just rock. They're releasing subtle geothermal energy, not enough to power a ship, but perhaps enough for a small generator." Jax's eyes widened. "Geothermal on a moon this geologically inert? That doesn't make sense." Kael, observing from orbit, noted the increased activity around the spires. His Xylos sensors confirmed Lena's findings. "Remarkable," he hummed. "They have identified a localized heat source. Their energy readings are increasing in frequency and intensity around the thermal anomalies. Their intuition, or perhaps their geological scanning capabilities, are quite advanced for a developing species." Jax still remained skeptical. "Even if they tap into it, it's a trickle," not enough for their power-hungry life support systems. The next cycle, a small team led by Jax began the arduous task of excavating around one of the spires. The ground was hard, like concrete, resisting their drills. The fine dust, disturbed by their efforts, billowed around them, clogging the delicate mechanisms of their tools. Their environmental suits developed tiny tears, quickly patched, but a constant reminder of the moon's unforgiving nature. The work was slow, painstaking. Days bled into weeks. Morale ebbed and flowed. Some crew members succumbed to the oppressive monotony, the constant cold, the recycled air. Whispers of despair circulated. "We're going to die here," one young ensign mumbled, staring blankly at the metal wall of the shelter. "There's no rescue, no hope." I overheard these words, but I chose not to directly address them. Instead, I focused on the tangible. "Every rivet, every weld, every moment of work brings us closer to home," I stated during our evening briefing, my voice steady, projecting a confidence I did not always feel. "We are building our home here, brick by brick, or rather metal sheet by metal sheet." Lena, meanwhile, had not given up on the idea of creating a sustainable food source. She painstakingly sifted through the mineral-rich dust, performing countless chemical analyses. She rigged a small, experimental bioreactor using a salvaged part from the ship's waste disposal unit. Her face, often pale from exhaustion, would light up when a new hypothesis formed. She found traces of unique, complex silicate structures in the dust, structures that resonated faintly with certain frequencies. "These crystals," she mused, holding a small, dull gray shard to the dim light. "They seem to absorb trace atmospheric gases, processing them in a way I don't understand. If we could replicate their structure, maybe we could create a more efficient air filter. Or something else entirely." Kael, from his silent observation post, noticed Lena's intense focus on the crystalline structures. He cross-referenced the human scans with Xylo's geological data. "The female human, Dr. Petrova, she is focusing on the void dust crystals," he reported to Jax, his voice holding a hint of surprise. "Our analysis shows these crystals are a form of proto-life, incredibly primitive, but they exhibit a unique chemosynthesis. We have long theorized their existence, but never observed them interacting with complex carbon-based life forms." Jax's multiple eyes blinked in rapid succession. "Proto-life on Xylos-Seven-Alpha, that's impossible. This moon is a dead rock." "Apparently not entirely," Kael responded, his hum deepening. "She is attempting to synthesize a nutrient base from them." Jax and his team finally broke through to a significant geothermal pocket beneath the spire. The air was thick with sulfurous fumes, but the heat was undeniable. With salvaged wires and a jury-rigged turbine, they managed to tap into a meager but steady supply of electrical power. The small generator hummed to life, a fragile promise of survival. The light inside our dome brightened, banishing some of the pervasive gloom. The air scrubber worked more efficiently. For the first time in weeks, we felt a flicker of hope, a warmth that wasn't just from our struggle. "It's not much," Jax admitted, wiping sweat from his brow, "but it's enough to keep us warm, to keep the air breathable, and to power Lena's experiments." I looked at him, truly seeing the exhaustion etched on his face, but also the fierce pride in his eyes. "It's everything, Jax," I corrected him. "It's a start." Lena, inspired by the new, consistent power source, worked tirelessly on her bioreactor. She spent hours, her face inches from the humming device, adjusting nutrient levels, tweaking the atmospheric composition within its small chamber. She crushed the void dust crystals, combining them with reclaimed organic waste from the ship. The smell was something awful, a mix of decay and chemical fumes, but she pressed on. One cycle, a faint green tinge appeared in the bioreactor's liquid. A single, microscopic organism, unlike anything catalogued in human science, had begun to replicate. "I did it!" Lena's shout echoed through the cramped dome, startling everyone. "It's synthesizing a basic protein. We can grow food." Her eyes, usually so serene, sparkled with a wild, triumphant light. A wave of relieved murmurs swept through the crew. It was a minuscule amount, not enough to feed everyone, but it was proof of concept. It was a miracle coaxed from nothing. On the Xylos Observer 1, Jax's vocalizer let out a series of stunned clicks. "She has cultivated proto-life from the void dust. Impossible. Our own scientists have attempted that for millennia with no success. Kael's multifaceted eyes blinked slowly. Their capacity for adaptive synthesis is beyond anything we have recorded in non-native species. They are repurposing materials, combining them in ways our own logic modules would deem inefficient, yet they yield results. He extended a digit, magnifying the image of Lena's small bioreactor. The protein strands? They are crude but functional. They are creating sustenance from the very dust of this moon. The next phase of our survival plan began: expansion. We needed more space, more air, more food. The current dome, hastily constructed, was already too small. We began to scavenge larger sections of the Odyssey *S hull, using its curved plating as the framework for new, larger domes. The low gravity was a double-edged sword. It made lifting heavy plates easier, but also made anchoring them against the moon's infrequent but powerful seismic tremors a constant challenge. Jax designed a system of interlocking panels, reinforced with salvaged beams, creating a network of tunnels and larger living spaces. Each section required meticulous sealing, endless hours spent welding and rewelding seams. The work was exhausting, repetitive, but with the promise of more space, more light, more comfortable living, the crew found new motivation. Lena, meanwhile, scaled up her bioreactor. She worked with an almost religious zeal, nurturing her small, artificial ecosystem. The green sludge inside her expanded tanks slowly, steadily, filling the dome with a peculiar, earthy smell that was both alien and, paradoxically, comforting. It was the smell of life emerging from the barren void. The first meal of synthesized protein, a tasteless, gelatinous cube, was distributed. It wasn't appetizing, but it was nutritious. It tasted like survival. A cheer, weak but heartfelt, erupted. We were no longer just surviving on rations. We were creating our own. Kael's observations became more frequent, more detailed. He noted the intricate details of the humans' construction methods, their clever repurposing of broken components. He saw the division of labor, the coordinated efforts, the quiet determination that permeated their actions. He noticed the small human gestures: a hand on a shoulder, a shared laugh over a bad joke, a moment of silent contemplation. "Their social cohesion is remarkable," Kael hummed, a new note entering his voice. "They do not splinter under duress. They coalesce, they adapt, they build." Jax, still somewhat incredulous, observed the growing settlement on the monitor. "They are still crude, Kael. Their technology is primitive. They cannot possibly hope to escape this moon." Kael turned his multifaceted eyes towards Jax. "Escape, perhaps not, but what they are building here is not merely a temporary shelter. It is a foundation. They are laying roots in a place where no roots should exist." A new problem arose. The geothermal generator, while stable, produced heat, but not enough for the entire expanded settlement. The outer domes remained dangerously cold, especially at night. Furthermore, the limited amount of light from the perpetually twilight sky meant a reliance on our dwindling internal power cells for illumination, which drained the power from Lena's growing bioreactors. We needed a new solution. During one of my solitary patrols outside the domes, the abrasive wind tugging at my suit, I noticed something strange about the moon's atmosphere. There were faint, almost imperceptible flickers in the distant upper reaches of the thin air, like distant lightning, but without the accompanying sound. I activated my suit's atmospheric scanner. The readings were baffling. Localized bursts of high-energy plasma appearing and dissipating in milliseconds. It was chaotic, unstable, but it was energy. I brought the data to Jax. His eyes widened as he reviewed the scans. "Plasma bursts in this atmosphere. That's impossible. There's no major ion source, no magnetic field strong enough to generate that kind of phenomenon." Lena, ever curious, leaned in. "Could it be related to the void dust crystals, their unique silicate structure? Perhaps they are acting as a catalyst, drawing in ambient energy from the solar wind or even from the moon's unstable core." Her mind, always seeking patterns, made the leap. Kael, observing the humans' new focus on the upper atmosphere, accessed the Xylos database. "The humans are investigating the atmospheric energy fluctuations," he informed Jax. "These are a known phenomenon on Xylos-Seven-Alpha, a byproduct of the proto-life's unique chemosynthesis in specific atmospheric pressures. Our models predicted these bursts would be too erratic, too dangerous to harness. Jax clicked his claws. They will try, won't they? Kael's hum resonated with a new sense of anticipation. They will, and they are already hypothesizing about the crystal's role. Remarkable. Jax, fueled by Lena's theory, began to experiment. He designed a series of makeshift atmospheric antennae, crude copper coils salvaged from ship cabling, reinforced with metal struts. The idea was to capture the errant plasma bursts, however fleeting, and convert them into usable energy. It was a desperate long shot, a gamble against the impossible. The first attempts were failures. The antennae warped, melted, or simply produced nothing. Frustration mounted. One young engineer, fatigued and disillusioned, snapped at Jax. "This is madness. We're wasting precious resources, precious time on a pipe dream. We should focus on what's real, on what we know." Jax, usually patient, simply stared at the man, his eyes burning with a quiet fury. "What's real," he stated, his voice low and steady, "is that if we don't find a new power source, we freeze. What's real is that we don't have the luxury of giving up." The engineer fell silent, shamed. I watched these interactions closely. My leadership style had always been by the book, strict adherence to protocol. But here, on this desolate moon, the rulebook had been incinerated in the crash. I learned to trust my crew's ingenuity, their unorthodox thinking. I saw Jax not just as an engineer, but as a stubborn, visionary leader in his own right. I saw Lena not just as a scientist, but as a beacon of relentless optimism. We were changing, adapting, becoming something new. After countless failed attempts, Jax had a breakthrough. He discovered that by encasing the copper coils in a specific type of superheated, refined void dust crystal, the antennae became more resilient, and more importantly, they began to capture the plasma bursts with a higher degree of efficiency. It was a crude, unstable energy source, but it worked. The new atmospheric generators, ugly contraptions cobbled together from scavenged parts and glowing with an eerie blue light, hummed outside our domes. They provided supplemental power, enough to increase the internal temperature, enough to provide more consistent light for Lena's bioreactors, enough to run a small, salvaged comms unit that we hoped one day might reach home. The Xylos Observer One was now a constant presence, though unseen, above the human settlement. Kael spent nearly all his cycles observing. He had documented the progression, from a desperate handful of survivors huddled in a wreckage to a growing, self-sufficient colony. The energy readings from Xylos-Seven-Alpha were now fluctuating with the rhythm of human activity, a new pulse on a dead world. "They have harnessed the atmospheric plasma bursts," Kael stated, a rare note of astonishment in his voice. "And they have done so using the proto-life crystals as a conductive medium. This is unprecedented. They have effectively turned a lethal environment into a power source." Jax's usually skeptical demeanor had softened. "They are tenacious, and their ability to improvise, to repurpose, is truly fascinating. Our own species, when faced with such an environment, would have immediately sought egress or self-termination protocols." Kael nodded, his multifaceted eyes fixed on the growing human settlement, a cluster of glowing domes against the dark moonscape. "Their drive for existence, it is profound. They do not merely survive, they thrive against overwhelming odds. They find solutions where there appear to be none." The settlement grew. New domes connected by airlocks formed a small, interconnected complex. We had a central mess hall, cramped but now filled with the earthy scent of growing protein paste, a medic bay, and small sleeping quarters. We even managed to create a small, garden dome where Lena experimented with more complex bioreactors, attempting to grow edible fungi from the proto-life nutrients. The air, though recycled, was cleaner, humid with the breath of living things. Laughter, once a rarity, could be heard occasionally. Children born on Earth, now growing up on this moon, explored the interconnected domes with an adventurous spirit. They saw not a trap, but a home. They saw possibility. One morning, as I oversaw the latest expansion of the domes, working alongside the crew, my hands blistered and aching, Lena approached me, her face pale but her eyes shining. "Commander," she whispered, "I think I've made a breakthrough, a significant one." She led me to her research dome, a space now filled with bubbling vats and strange, glowing tubes. The void dust crystals. she began. "They're not just absorbing trace gases and radiating heat. They're also interacting with the moon's subtle gravitational anomalies. I've found a way to purify them, to refine them into a stable crystalline structure that exhibits unique properties." She pointed to a small, isolated chamber. Inside, a refined crystal about the size of my fist shimmered with an internal light. It wasn't just reflecting light. It was generating it, a soft, warm glow that seemed to emanate from its very core. "It's a form of energy storage, Commander," Lena explained, her voice trembling slightly with excitement. "But more than that, it's a resonant crystal. If we can produce enough of these, we could create a stable, long-range communication beacon. One powerful enough to cut through the void, strong enough to reach Earth." A thrill ran through me, a sensation I hadn't felt since the crash, real hope. But also fear, hope for rescue, fear of failure. "How many cycles until we can produce enough?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Many cycles," Lena admitted, her gaze fixed on the glowing crystal. "It's a slow, painstaking process. Each crystal requires precise atmospheric and thermal conditions. But it's possible. We have the resources now, the power, the ingenuity." Kael's sensors registered the unprecedented energy signature emanating from Lena's research dome. He amplified the image, seeing the human female staring at the glowing crystal. "They are developing a highly efficient energy storage device," Kael announced to Jax, his hum almost a purr. "From the proto-life crystals and its resonant frequency, it appears to be a form of long-range communication. They are attempting to signal their home world." Jax was silent for a long moment, his multifaceted eyes wide with something akin to awe. "They are building a civilization, Kael, on a world we deemed uninhabitable. They are not merely surviving, they are advancing. They are creating complex technologies from nothing but raw materials and their own will." Kael activated a broader spectrum scan of Xylos-Seven-Alpha. He projected the results onto the main view screen. The small human settlement glowed like a fragile, determined jewel against the bleakness. It was a beacon of life, of innovation, of an unyielding spirit. "Indeed, Jax," Kael responded, his voice losing its usual detached hum, replaced by a resonance that bordered on reverence. "They have turned a death trap into a cradle. We came here to observe a species doomed to extinction. Instead, we witnessed their true nature, their capacity for creation, their boundless ingenuity. The Xylos observer one remained." Kael continued to watch. He saw the humans work day after day, refining the crystals, building the massive communication array from salvaged parts, its dish slowly taking shape against the perpetual twilight sky. He saw Commander Rostova, no longer just a leader but a mentor, a worker, her hands as calloused as any engineer's. He saw Jax, the engineer, his cynicism replaced by a quiet pride, teaching younger crew members how to coax power from the plasma storms. He saw Lena, the botanist, radiating calm, her hands covered in nutrient paste, tending to her glowing crystals, a gardener of impossible life. The humans built a new life, a new society on the Void Moon. They called their settlement New Hope. And as the massive communication dish finally locked into place, its surface reflecting the distant, unseen stars, Kael knew something profound had shifted. The Xylos had learned something new about the universe, not from their ancient archives, but from the tenacious, inventive, and utterly remarkable humans who had turned nothing into everything under the silent, watchful eyes of an astonished galaxy. The signal, a fragile pulse of pure hope, finally left the Void Moon, reaching out into the silent, vast darkness. A beacon from a civilization built on grit, ingenuity, and an unbreakable will to survive. And somewhere, an unknown, distant Earth began to receive a faint, peculiar signal, one that spoke of impossible survival.